To dismantle the pervasive influence of narcissism, it is essential to consider the role that healthy boundaries play in personal development and the restoration of balance in relationships. Narcissists, by their very nature, tend to disregard the boundaries of others, viewing them as obstacles to their own desires or needs. This often results in manipulative behaviors, a lack of consideration for others' feelings, and a distorted sense of entitlement. In contrast, individuals who are able to establish and respect personal boundaries create healthier environments for themselves and those around them. Boundaries are not merely a defense mechanism, but an integral part of emotional well-being that allows individuals to assert their needs, protect their energy, and maintain a sense of self. Establishing strong boundaries in relationships, both personal and professional, is vital to prevent the narcissistic tendencies of exploitation and control from taking root. At the core of boundaries is the recognition that every person is an autonomous individual with their own thoughts, emotions, and rights. When narcissism prevails, these rights are often infringed upon. Narcissists can be skilled at manipulating others into giving up their personal space, time, and emotional resources for the sake of the narcissist's own needs and desires. In a world without narcissism, individuals would be able to recognize and respect the sovereignty of others. People would understand that it is not selfish to prioritize their own well-being, nor is it a weakness to stand up for what they need. Developing the ability to assert boundaries means learning how to say no without guilt, to protect one's emotional health, and to avoid being manipulated into sacrificing personal priorities for the sake of someone else's demands. This skill is not only beneficial to individuals, but is foundational to creating healthier relationships and communities where people can thrive without fear of exploitation or emotional harm. For those who have been entangled in relationships with narcissists, re-establishing boundaries is often a difficult and long process. Narcissists have a way of breaking down the emotional defenses of their victims, causing them to doubt their own worth or sense of self. The emotional manipulation and gaslighting that often accompany narcissistic behaviors can create a toxic dynamic where boundaries are consistently disregarded. For someone recovering from such an experience, rebuilding boundaries requires a deep commitment to self-respect and self-care. It involves recognizing that their worth is not dependent on constantly meeting the needs of others, nor on allowing others to dictate their emotions or decisions. Learning to say no, to assert one's needs, and to reclaim one's sense of identity is crucial for healing. It is also important to recognize that boundaries are not rigid walls, but flexible guidelines that can evolve as individuals become more self-aware and emotionally secure. Establishing and maintaining boundaries is an ongoing process that requires constant attention, self-reflection, and sometimes external support, whether through therapy, counseling, or trusted friends and family. In relationships where narcissism is not present, boundaries are still essential, but are maintained in a more balanced way. Healthy relationships thrive on mutual respect, where each person is allowed to exist as their own individual while simultaneously fostering connection and intimacy. In these relationships, individuals are able to express their needs, emotions, and desires openly without fear of judgment or manipulation. There is a sense of trust that each person will respect the other's personal space and autonomy, creating an environment where both parties feel valued and understood. This allows for a more genuine connection, one that is not dependent on power dynamics or self-serving motives, but rather on a shared understanding of the importance of both personal freedom and mutual care. Additionally, boundaries play a critical role in creating a culture of respect and empathy in society at large. In workplaces, for example, establishing boundaries between personal and professional life ensures that individuals are not overburdened, exploited, or expected to sacrifice their well-being for the benefit of the organization or those in positions of power. In a culture where narcissism is minimized, organizations would prioritize the mental and emotional health of their employees, ensuring that work demands do not erode personal time or self-care. Respecting personal boundaries fosters a sense of fairness and equality, allowing everyone to contribute without feeling exploited or undervalued. This can lead to increased productivity, greater job satisfaction, and healthier work environments overall. By fostering an atmosphere of mutual respect and understanding, individuals within organizations are more likely to work together collaboratively and effectively without the toxic competition or self-serving behaviors that often arise in environments where narcissism thrives. Similarly, in larger societal contexts, the establishment of collective boundaries is necessary to prevent the erosion of community well-being by individuals or groups who seek to dominate or control. A society that recognizes and respects individual rights and personal autonomy is less likely to become polarized or fragmented by the narcissistic pursuit of power and dominance. In a world without narcissism, societal boundaries would ensure that no single group or individual could infringe upon the rights, dignity, or freedoms of others. This includes acknowledging the importance of social justice, equal rights, and access to resources, and ensuring that the systems in place do not perpetuate inequality or exploitation. These boundaries would not be about isolation or exclusion, but about creating a balanced, fair environment where everyone's needs and rights are respected and protected. The process of setting boundaries and maintaining healthy relational dynamics is essential for fostering environments where narcissism cannot thrive. Narcissism, by its very nature, seeks to breach these boundaries, taking from others without giving, manipulating others for personal gain, and failing to recognize the emotional and psychological toll it inflicts. When boundaries are clear and respected, narcissistic behaviors are less likely to go unchecked, and the power dynamics that enable them are disrupted. This shift allows individuals to reclaim their autonomy, heal from past wounds, and build relationships based on mutual respect and shared growth. It is through this commitment to healthy boundaries that individuals can create a world where emotional exploitation and manipulation are no longer the norm, and where each person is free to express themselves authentically and without fear of harm. The path to restoring a world that is less dominated by narcissism begins with individual self-awareness and a commitment to personal growth. Narcissism, as a destructive force, thrives in environments where individuals fail to reflect on their behaviors, understand their impact on others, or seek self-improvement. To counter this, it is essential that individuals take responsibility for their own actions and engage in introspection, seeking to understand the root causes of their narcissistic tendencies. This process of self-awareness is not only vital for healing, but also for preventing the perpetuation of narcissistic behaviors in future generations. By taking ownership of one's actions and their emotional impact on others, people can begin the difficult but necessary journey toward empathy and healthier interpersonal dynamics. First and foremost, individuals must develop the ability to recognize narcissistic traits within themselves. This requires a deep level of self-honesty and vulnerability, as it involves confronting the uncomfortable truth that self-centeredness, manipulation, or a lack of empathy may be at play. Narcissistic behaviors often manifest in subtle ways, such as the need for constant praise, a tendency to belittle others, or a refusal to accept responsibility for one's mistakes. These patterns may have developed as coping mechanisms in response to insecurities or past traumas, but recognizing them is the first step toward breaking free from the cycle. Self-awareness provides the foundation for change as individuals begin to realize the negative impact of their actions and the underlying emotional needs that drive them. This process often requires external support, whether through therapy, mentorship, or honest feedback from loved ones, as it can be difficult for someone trapped in narcissistic patterns to view themselves objectively. Once narcissistic traits are identified, the next step is to embrace personal accountability. Narcissism thrives in environments where people avoid responsibility, constantly shifting blame or deflecting criticism. To truly move toward personal growth, individuals must accept responsibility for their actions and the ways in which they affect others. This means acknowledging when one has hurt someone, whether through manipulation, disregard for others' feelings, or self-centered behavior. Accepting accountability is not about self-criticism or self-punishment, but about recognizing that true growth comes from learning from one's mistakes and making amends. It involves the difficult task of setting aside one's ego in order to face the harm that may have been caused, and taking concrete steps to change one's behavior moving forward. In parallel with cultivating self-awareness and accountability, individuals must also work to develop empathy. Empathy is the ability to understand and share the feelings of another, and it is a skill that can be nurtured over time with intentional effort. For narcissists, empathy often feels alien or difficult because they are so consumed with their own needs and perceptions that they struggle to see beyond themselves. However, empathy is an essential part of building healthier relationships and creating a more compassionate society. Developing empathy requires individuals to make a conscious effort to listen to others, to truly try to understand their emotions and to put themselves in someone else's shoes. This can be done by paying attention to the subtle cues in conversations, acknowledging the emotional experiences of others, and allowing space for vulnerability. It also involves being open to feedback, even when it is uncomfortable, and refraining from defensiveness when others express their feelings or concerns. As individuals grow in their capacity for empathy, they become better equipped to foster meaningful connections and to contribute to a culture of understanding and support. Another crucial step in the process of restoration is the cultivation of humility. Narcissism often arises from a fragile sense of self that is constantly seeking external validation to feel secure. Humility, on the other hand, is rooted in an authentic sense of self-worth that is not contingent on the approval or admiration of others. It allows individuals to embrace their flaws and imperfections, acknowledging that they do not have all the answers and that they are not superior to others. Humility encourages people to see value in others, to recognize that everyone has unique strengths and perspectives to offer, and to embrace the idea that true success is measured by one's character rather than one's image or status. This shift toward humility enables individuals to become more open, more collaborative, and more willing to learn from others, creating a more supportive and inclusive environment in which narcissism cannot thrive. Additionally, the restoration of a world less shaped by narcissism requires a shift in societal values. Modern culture has increasingly rewarded individual success and external validation, which has exacerbated the prevalence of narcissistic behaviors. To counter this, society must place greater value on qualities such as empathy, cooperation, and social responsibility. This shift can begin with the way we educate and raise children. In environments that emphasize the importance of kindness, respect for others, and the value of emotional intelligence, narcissistic traits are less likely to take root. Parents, educators, and mentors can play a critical role in modeling these behaviors and teaching younger generations the importance of emotional awareness and healthy relationships. Schools and communities should prioritize developing social and emotional skills alongside intellectual achievements, encouraging individuals to work together to listen and to support one another. At a larger societal level, institutions and media outlets can help foster these values by shifting the focus away from the glorification of wealth, fame, and individual achievement, and instead promoting stories and examples of individuals who demonstrate empathy, resilience, and selflessness. Public figures, leaders, and influencers have an especially significant role to play in shaping public perceptions of success and virtue. If society begins to elevate those who demonstrate true character, integrity, and a commitment to the well-being of others, we may see a shift toward a culture that discourages narcissistic behaviors and values authenticity and compassion instead. Finally, creating a world that is less dominated by narcissism also requires building communities that prioritize the well-being of all their members. Whether in families, workplaces, or broader social settings, creating environments that emphasize cooperation, respect, and mutual support allows individuals to feel valued and understood without the need for constant self-promotion. By nurturing environments where empathy is practiced, vulnerability is welcomed, and individuals are seen for who they truly are, we can slowly begin to reverse the negative impact of narcissism and create a culture in which collective well-being is prioritized over individual gain. This process will take time and requires effort at both the individual and societal levels, but it is through this collective commitment to change that we can begin to imagine and build a world where narcissism no longer dominates human interactions. Narcissism's infiltration into modern culture is not a recent phenomenon, but it has certainly become more pronounced in recent years, largely due to the rise of social media and consumerism. These two forces have amplified narcissistic behaviors and values, creating a society where self-promotion, image crafting, and external validation have taken center stage. Today, narcissism is often celebrated or even rewarded, with individuals seeking constant affirmation of their self-worth through likes, comments, and followers. This cultural shift has contributed to the normalization of narcissistic behaviors, making them appear not only acceptable but desirable in many contexts. Social media has created a platform where individuals can curate and manipulate their public personas, presenting an idealized version of themselves to the world. Platforms like Instagram, TikTok, and Facebook encourage users to showcase their most glamorous, successful, or attractive selves. The more followers, likes, and shares one accumulates, the more validation they receive, and the more their sense of self-worth becomes tied to this external feedback. This creates an environment where the pursuit of popularity, recognition, and superficial success becomes the primary focus, overshadowing deeper, more meaningful connection. People are incentivized to present a carefully crafted image that is far removed from their true selves, with authenticity often taking a backseat to visibility. The constant need for approval through these platforms fuels the narcissistic drive for validation as people strive to maintain an image of perfection or superiority. The more they project an idealized version of themselves, the more they expect admiration that rarely offers any real satisfaction. Social media has also blurred the lines between self-promotion and self-worth, with many individuals equating their value with the number of likes or comments they receive. The constant comparison to others, facilitated by these platforms, fosters a competitive atmosphere where individuals measure their worth based on how they stack up against others. This creates an unhealthy focus on external validation, where people begin to feel inadequate or inferior if they do not receive the level of attention or admiration they desire. The narcissistic traits of vanity and self-centeredness are not only tolerated, but often praised in this environment, encouraging people to seek more and more external affirmation to fill the void within themselves. Another key factor that has contributed to the rise of narcissism in modern culture is the emphasis on consumerism. In a society driven by materialism and the pursuit of wealth, success is often equated with the acquisition of goods, status symbols, and personal achievements. Advertising and marketing play a significant role in promoting the idea that one's worth is tied to the things they own, the experiences they have, and the image they project to the world. The idea of keeping up with the Joneses has been amplified in the digital age, where people are constantly bombarded with images of others living seemingly perfect lives. This constant exposure to wealth, success, and luxury creates a competitive atmosphere where individuals are encouraged to pursue more possessions, more recognition, more fame to validate their worth. Narcissism thrives in this environment where personal value is linked to external markers of success rather than intrinsic qualities such as character, kindness, or integrity. The consumer-driven culture also fosters a sense of entitlement, which is a hallmark of narcissistic behavior. Many individuals are led to believe that they deserve special treatment, that their desires should be prioritized, and that they are entitled to the best of everything. This sense of entitlement, often fueled by media portrayals of the self-made individual or the overnight success, contributes to the perpetuation of narcissistic ideals. People come to expect instant gratification and may become frustrated or resentful when their needs or desires are not immediately fulfilled. This attitude of entitlement feeds into the larger narcissistic worldview, where the individual is placed at the center of the universe and their desires take precedence over the needs or feelings of others. Moreover, the rise of individualism in modern culture has contributed to the proliferation of narcissistic tendencies. As societies place increasing emphasis on personal achievement, independence, and self-reliance, there is often little room left for collective well-being, shared responsibility, or community. In this context, narcissism becomes a natural outgrowth of the broader cultural values that prioritize individual success and personal satisfaction over collective cooperation and empathy. The idea of doing what makes you happy or following your own path has become so ingrained in the cultural narrative that it can sometimes obscure the importance of considering the needs and well-being of others. Narcissistic behaviors such as disregarding the feelings of others, manipulating situations for personal gain, or prioritizing one's own needs above all else are increasingly seen as acceptable or even admirable in a world that glorifies personal success. In many ways, narcissism has become embedded in the fabric of modern life. From the way we present ourselves online to the way we define success and value, narcissistic values have permeated every aspect of our culture. Social media, consumerism, and individualism have all contributed to the rise of narcissistic behaviors, creating a culture where self-promotion, external validation, and personal image are often more important than authenticity, empathy, and connection. This cultural shift has made narcissism not only more widespread, but more normalized, creating a society where the pursuit of self-interest, status, and recognition often trumps the pursuit of meaningful relationships or shared communal goals. As narcissism continues to shape the values of modern culture, it becomes increasingly difficult to break free from the cycle of self-centeredness that defines much of contemporary life. Envisioning a world without narcissists is not merely an intellectual exercise, but a radical shift in how we perceive human relationships, societal structures, and individual growth. Narcissism, at its core, distorts our connections with others and fractures the sense of shared humanity that allows societies to thrive. When we imagine a world without narcissists, we are not simply thinking of the removal of individuals, but of the dissolution of a mindset that has far-reaching consequences for both personal and collective well-being. A world without narcissism is a world where empathy, humility, and mutual respect are the driving forces behind human interactions, rather than self-centeredness, entitlement, and competition. In this world, relationships would no longer be transactional. People would no longer view each other primarily as sources of validation or tools to be exploited for personal gain. Instead, interactions would be grounded in genuine care and understanding, where the needs and feelings of others are considered alongside one's own. Empathy, which is the ability to truly understand and share the feelings of another, would be the foundational principle that guides human connection. This shift would foster an environment in which people engage with one another authentically, without the ulterior motives that often characterize narcissistic relationships. The absence of narcissism would allow for the flourishing of deep, meaningful relationships where individuals can feel safe, understood, and supported. Moreover, in a world without narcissism, the concept of success would be redefined. Rather than being measured by personal achievement, power, or status, success would be understood in terms of collective well-being and shared growth. The individual's worth would not be determined by external markers like wealth, appearance, or popularity, but by their capacity for compassion, integrity, and contribution to the greater good. In this new framework, people would be motivated not by the desire to outshine others, but by a genuine commitment to make a positive impact on those around them. And this shift would encourage collaboration over competition, fostering a sense of community where collective progress is valued over individual gain. The desire for status or superiority would no longer drive people to undermine or exploit others, but would be replaced by a commitment to lifting each other up and working together for the betterment of all. A world without narcissism would also be one in which personal growth and self-awareness are prioritized over external validation. Individuals would no longer seek their worth through the approval of others or the accumulation of material possessions, but through introspection and self-improvement. Rather than relying on others to fill the void of insecurity or emotional emptiness, people would develop a strong sense of self that is rooted in their values, principles, and the quality of their relationships. This would lead to a more resilient and emotionally stable society, where individuals are less prone to the volatility that often accompanies the narcissistic pursuit of validation. People would be able to experience the full spectrum of human emotions, including vulnerability, without fear of judgment or exploitation, knowing that their worth does not hinge on the opinions or admiration of others. In this world, the public and private spheres would be less dominated by image and appearance. Social media, for example, would not be a platform for self-promotion or comparison, but rather a space for authentic self-expression and connection. The pressure to present a perfect, curated image of oneself would dissipate, allowing individuals to be more genuine and less concerned with how they are perceived. This would foster a culture where self-worth is not determined by likes or followers, but by the depth of one's character and the authenticity of their interactions. People would be free to express themselves without the constant fear of judgment or the need to craft an idealized version of their lives. The emphasis on external image would be replaced by a focus on internal growth. and the development of virtues like humility, kindness, and integrity. Furthermore, in a world without narcissism, leadership would take on a new form. Leaders would be those who serve others, who listen with empathy and act with integrity. They would be individuals who inspire by their example, not by their power or influence, but by their capacity to uplift and guide others. Leadership would no longer be about dominating or controlling others, but about empowering them to reach their full potential. The narcissistic traits that often drive individuals to seek power for their own sake, such as a desire for admiration or a need to feel superior, would be replaced by a genuine desire to serve the common good. Leaders would prioritize the needs of their communities over their own ambitions, creating a society in which the welfare of others is central to decision-making. In this world, those in positions of power would be accountable to the people they serve, and their success would be measured by the positive impact they have on the lives of others. At a broader societal level, the absence of narcissism would create a culture of collaboration, trust, and mutual respect. Society would place a higher value on cooperation than competition, on understanding rather than judgment, and on shared success rather than individual glory. This would lead to more equitable systems where the focus is on addressing collective needs and ensuring that all individuals have the opportunity to thrive. Rather than being divided by personal interests and self-serving agendas, people would come together around shared values and a common vision for the future. Social divisions based on status, wealth, or power would be less pronounced, and the emphasis would be on creating a society that is inclusive, compassionate, and just for all. In essence, a world without narcissism is a world where people are no longer trapped in the pursuit of self-importance, but are free to engage with one another in a meaningful and compassionate way. It is a world where human potential is not defined by the accumulation of wealth or status, but by the depth of one's character, the quality of one's relationships, and the ability to contribute to the collective good. Such a world would be one of profound emotional fulfillment, where individuals feel secure in their sense of self and are motivated by the desire to uplift others rather than outdo them. It is a world where the ego is not the driving force behind human behavior, but empathy and understanding lead the way forward. Let us begin with a hard truth, one that we don't often confront because it is uncomfortable to acknowledge, yet undeniably necessary. There is a phenomenon that permeates much of our society today, perhaps even more so than we care to admit. It is a force that twists our perception of ourselves and of each other, undermining the very fabric of human connection. It is the narcissist, the individual who, often by design, places themselves at the center of the universe, viewing others not as equals, but as mere reflections of their own inflated sense of importance. Narcissism is not merely a personality trait, but a complex and pervasive mindset that shapes the way individuals perceive themselves, others, and the world around them. At its core, narcissism involves an exaggerated sense of self-importance, a need for constant admiration, and a lack of empathy for others. Narcissists view themselves as superior to those around them, and they demand that their needs, desires, and emotions take precedence over those of others. This distorted self-perception often leads to manipulation, exploitation, and a disregard for the feelings or well-being of others. One of the most striking features of narcissism is the way it distorts reality. Narcissists often live in a self-created bubble where their self-worth is tied to external validation, praise, and recognition. They rely heavily on others to feed their fragile ego, and when they don't receive the adoration or attention they feel entitled to, they can become enraged or depressed. This constant need for external affirmation drives them to craft a facade of perfection, carefully curating an image that they believe will make them appear superior. The pursuit of this idealized image can become an all-consuming obsession, overshadowing any meaningful connection with others. The narcissistic mindset also significantly impacts the way individuals engage with their surroundings. Rather than engaging in genuine reciprocal relationships based on trust, respect, and mutual care, narcissists often view others as tools or objects to fulfill their needs. People become pawns in their quest for power, admiration, and control. They might manipulate others into providing attention or resources using charm, flattery, or deceit to maintain their sense of superiority. Their relationships are transactional, driven by what they can extract from others rather than what they can offer in return. This self-centered worldview extends beyond personal relationships into the professional and social spheres as well. Narcissistic individuals often rise to positions of influence or authority not because of their competence or ability to work with others, but because of their ruthless pursuit of self-interest and their ability to manipulate circumstances to their advantage. They thrive in environments where their image is bolstered by the admiration or fear of others, and where they can maintain control over situations and people. The narcissist's success is often at the expense of collaboration, teamwork, or ethical considerations, as their focus is solely on their own gain. At its most destructive, narcissism breeds toxic environments. In families, workplaces, or communities where narcissism is prevalent, the atmosphere becomes one of constant tension, competition, and emotional exhaustion. Others are often left feeling invisible, unimportant, or devalued. The narcissist's inability to empathize with others leaves little room for understanding or support. They may belittle or criticize those around them, seeing any vulnerability or difference as a threat to their own superiority. Their emotional volatility, driven by an unrelenting need for validation, makes interactions unpredictable and exhausting for those in close proximity. Furthermore, the narcissist's lack of empathy means that they rarely, if ever, take responsibility for their actions. They are quick to blame others for any failure or shortcoming, deflecting any criticism and positioning themselves as the victim. This pattern of avoidance keeps them from introspection or personal growth. They are incapable of seeing beyond their own narrow perspective, which means they are unable to recognize the hurt they cause or understand the impact of their behavior on others. Their world is one where they are perpetually right, justified, and above reproach. This is not to say that all individuals who display narcissistic traits are beyond redemption. Narcissism exists on a spectrum, and some people may exhibit narcissistic behaviors without fully embodying the personality disorder. However, when the mindset becomes entrenched, it can shape how a person interacts with the world in a way that is damaging both to themselves and to others. The mindset becomes a barrier to genuine self-awareness, growth, and connection. The pervasive nature of narcissism, particularly in today's culture, is exacerbated by social media, where the cultivation of an idealized self-image is both encouraged and rewarded. Platforms such as Instagram, TikTok, and Facebook create environments where external validation through likes, comments, and followers becomes a primary metric of self-worth. This fosters a culture of comparison, where individuals constantly evaluate their value based on how they measure up to others. The pursuit of status and recognition through these platforms can further entrench narcissistic tendencies, as individuals are increasingly driven by the need to present an image of perfection and superiority. In this way, narcissism is not just an individual pathology, but a reflection of broader societal values. In a world where success, popularity, and material wealth are often equated with personal worth, it is easy to see how narcissism thrives. The constant bombardment of curated images and self-promotional content reinforces the idea that one's worth is based on external validation and the adoration of others. Narcissism becomes not just an individual ailment, but a cultural norm, where the pursuit of self-interest and personal image takes precedence over deeper, more meaningful connections. The narcissistic mindset, therefore, is a multifaceted and insidious force that affects individuals, relationships, and society as a whole. It distorts reality, undermines empathy, and fosters a culture of competition, manipulation, and self-aggrandizement. It is a mindset that ultimately leaves those who embody it hollow and disconnected from the very humanity they seek to elevate. The cost of narcissism is not confined to the individual who exhibits these traits, but spills over into the lives of those around them, often creating a ripple effect of emotional, psychological, and social damage. At a personal level, narcissism can lead to isolation, insecurity, and a constant search for external validation. The narcissist world is one of perpetual dissatisfaction, where their inflated sense of self-worth never quite matches the external recognition they crave. Despite their outward appearance of confidence or success, many narcissists harbor deep insecurities that they attempt to mask with their larger-than-life persona. They may constantly seek praise, approval, and admiration, but this never truly satisfies them, leaving them in a constant state of craving and vulnerability. The more they seek outside validation, the less they develop a true sense of self-worth that is grounded in their own values, abilities, or achievements. This is a profound form of internal emptiness, which can lead to emotional turmoil, anxiety, and depression. The narcissist's inability to connect meaningfully with others only deepens this void, creating a cycle of self-doubt and superficiality. For those who are close to a narcissist, the costs can be even more severe. Narcissists often engage in exploitative and manipulative behaviors, using people to fulfill their needs without regard for their feelings or well-being. They see others as extensions of themselves, and their relationships are transactional in nature. Friends, family members, or romantic partners may feel emotionally drained, used, and unappreciated. The narcissist's constant need for admiration means that those around them are often placed in a position where they must constantly validate and support them, even at the cost of their own emotional health. Over time, this dynamic can lead to feelings of resentment, frustration, and helplessness. In a romantic relationship, for example, a narcissistic partner may demand constant attention and adoration while showing little interest in the emotional needs of the other person. They may belittle their partner, dismiss their feelings, or manipulate them to maintain control and power. This creates a toxic environment where the non-narcissistic individual feels invisible, unimportant, and emotionally neglected. The psychological toll of being involved with a narcissist can be profound. Victims of narcissistic abuse often experience anxiety, depression, and a diminished sense of self-worth. Narcissists have a tendency to gaslight others, distorting the reality of situations to maintain their image and avoid responsibility. This manipulation creates confusion and self-doubt in the person being manipulated, leaving them questioning their perceptions, feelings, and even their sanity. Over time, this can lead to a profound loss of confidence and identity. The narcissist's disregard for the other person's emotions and needs, combined with their constant need for control and validation, results in a deeply unbalanced and unhealthy relationship dynamic. The cost of narcissism extends beyond personal relationships and affects communities and organizations as well. In workplaces or other social environments, narcissistic individuals can cause significant dysfunction. Their self-centered approach to interactions, coupled with their need for admiration, can create a toxic atmosphere where collaboration, empathy, and mutual respect are lacking. Narcissists may undermine colleagues, take credit for others' work, or manipulate situations to further their own agendas, often at the expense of others' success or well-being. This behavior can lead to decreased morale, productivity, and trust within a team or organization. Those who are caught in the orbit of a narcissist may feel demoralized, undervalued, and unable to thrive. In such environments, the narcissist's pursuit of power and status often trumps the collective well-being of the group. The societal cost of narcissism is equally concerning. A culture that values self-promotion, personal image, and superficial success over integrity, empathy, and collaboration can become fragmented and shallow. When narcissistic behavior is rewarded, whether through social media fame, corporate success, or political power, it sets a precedent that undermines collective well-being. The emphasis on individual achievement and external validation fosters a competitive me-first mentality that erodes the sense of community and shared responsibility. Instead of working toward common goals, people become more focused on elevating themselves, often at the expense of others. This can contribute to social isolation, inequality, and a general lack of social cohesion. Narcissist leaders in particular can perpetuate harmful ideologies, as their lack of empathy and self-centered worldview often blind them to the needs of others. They may make decisions based solely on personal gain, disregarding the consequences for the larger community or society. The emotional cost of narcissism also extends to the narcissists themselves. Despite their outward appearance of confidence and superiority, many live in a constant state of emotional turmoil. Their need for external validation creates an ongoing cycle of insecurity, and they may struggle with feelings of inadequacy, jealousy, and fear of exposure. They are often driven by a deep fear of being revealed as flawed or unworthy, which leads to defensive behaviors such as aggression, manipulation, or denial of responsibility. Narcissists often have difficulty forming authentic, lasting connections with others because their relationships are based on maintaining a false sense of superiority rather than genuine intimacy or care. This can lead to loneliness and a profound sense of disconnection. In many cases, narcissism can also hinder personal growth. Because narcissists view themselves as superior, they are resistant to feedback or self-reflection. They often reject any form of criticism, viewing it as an attack on their identity rather than an opportunity for growth. This closed-off mentality prevents them from addressing their flaws, learning from their mistakes, or evolving as individuals. The cost of this stagnation is immense, as it keeps them trapped in a cycle of self-deception and immaturity.